Thank you for having me, and it's always a pleasure to talk about these things because I think um, fundamentally the tools that we have in advertising are probably the most powerful tools to bring any sort of change, and we use them permanently, and I think we have many ways of using them more effectively, or not necessarily more effectively, but to a bigger effect than just uh, a commercial effect. And I think we need to be very responsible with what we do. Um, Let me start by telling you that the fundamental motivation for getting involved in this project was, and I've spoken about this many times, was that I was I had lived all of my life in a country that was at war with itself. I had never seen a day of peace. Not, and this is not to say that the war actually affected me personally in any way, because as you can probably see about what's happening in Ukraine, for example, well, Kiev is not really affected on a daily basis, maybe, but life goes on. Life kind of goes on, but there is a war in the background, and this was a war of people that were basically the same. They just wound up on the wrong side or on different sides. And that made life very, very uncomfortable. It made it uncomfortable for me personally, but it made it uncomfortable for everybody. Nobody knew what the future was, and there was a lot of violence. There was a lot of death, and it was connected to pure things that could be solved differently. That could be solved in at least talking to each other and not just pretending that you're talking to each other and shooting. Uh, but the one message that I think is the most important and it has evolved over time as I have been talking about this over time is that there are no silver bullets, and there's no pun intended here. There are no silver bullets. This is never a an issue of one uh, event, one advertising event, or one advertising idea that changes things. It is never that. It is always a long, long process that goes on in the background. And um, what 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 motivated to do this was we had been in war all of my life, and the opportunity came to me because we were approached by the government at the time to try to come up with a structured communications approach. These every war, every conflict has, I would say, three basic levels. The military level, which is what is very visible, the political level, which is less visible, but it's really what keeps these things happening or what could stop them from happening. And I think the third level is a propaganda level, to call it very, very clearly. It is getting people on side so that there is conviction. Um, and we were approached, I guess, expecting a little bit of do some propaganda for the government. Uh, Demonstrate that we're on the right side, that we are in the right, we are in the right side of this conflict, or in the correct side, because yeah, it's not left or right. It's we were in the correct side of this conflict, and it was interesting because that is always the temptation, and that seems to be the easy way into these things. It is, yes, we're right, you're wrong, and I'm going to prove to you, and I'm going to communicate to you in as effectively as I can how wrong you are. Uh, but we realized early on that we really had no idea. even though we were Colombians, and even though we had grown there, we had been there all of our lives, we really had no idea. We had no idea why these people joined the guerrilla time and time again. Why was there why was there an appeal? And you tend to think that there is an appeal to join the military because of all the wonderful campaigns that people do joining the military, right? And it's be all that you can be, and you know all these, and there's a certain amount of cachet attached to it, right? But uh, but you would think, why would there be any of joining the guerrilla? So in that process, we started discovering that by talking to the people that had joined the guerrilla, by talking to the people that had left the guerrilla, that their motivations were very similar to the people who were joining the army, or who were fighting against them. Or so understanding that in reality, in conflicts, there is no right or wrong. Uh, there is disagreements, and you should, if you get over the disagreements, you might as well. There is no need for the armed conflict, right?
That's very
Uh,
powerful understanding.
yeah, we came to the first very important conclusion after that we could off that if we were going to do something that was effective, there could be no judgment, meaning there is no you're doing something that is wrong.
Oh, that's really profound.
There was no right or wrong in there. There was just a suggestion that there may be a better way of doing what you wanted to do, but no judgment. And I think that over time was what eventually made the campaign very successful, because there was no implicit, as you leave the guerrilla, you're going to be judged as having been wrong. It was just, this is a path you took, but there is another one, and you chose to change tack, but that's it. But you didn't stop going forward, if you will, to use a sailing analogy. Um, so no judgment was the first thing. And the second thing that we understood was that there were very basic human things that we all shared. And those very basic human things were, we all wanted to protect children. We all wanted to have a good time. We all wanted to be able to enjoy life without worrying and without looking over our shoulders. So there were very basic things that we all wanted. Focusing on those creatively was what gave the campaign a completely different spin to everything that had been done before. If it went wrong, they still had all the other alternatives working, the political, the military, the legal. So everything was in place, but this was a very, very little to lose and very much to a lot to gain. And I would say that the third thing that I learned from the beginning, or that we tried from the beginning and it worked, was, and this is probably one of the most important ones, but it isn't very profound, and that is, make things beautiful. Beautiful things, pleasing things, things that are visually pleasing, are at least, if not more satisfying, they're at least more, they call your attention a bit more. So there was an element of craft, of producing things well, of doing them carefully, not carelessly, making sure that the typography, which is something that nobody would have cared about, the typography, the photography, everything that was involved was pleasing to the eye, was immediately pleasing. So it kind of, I guess it's more peaceful. Beautiful things are kind of more peaceful.
Yes,
I
yes.
I see everything that you have behind you. You have the ferns. You have everything about what I'm seeing is crafted, and I believe that that is much more important that we give credit to
Well, I
than
do
these.
too. I feel like it's a very high spiritual thing, actually, right up there with truth, actually.
Yeah,
I think beauty is very high, and it is that quality of peace and safety and truth, really.
yeah, yeah. And so those are the three things that we learned very early on. Do not judge. Focus on the things that bring us together as human beings. Don't try to look for an ideological crossover. Don't try to look for, no, look at the basic human emotions that we share and do it in a beautiful and careful way. Make sure that everybody who looks at that work understands that it has been crafted with love, if you will. There has been an effort put into it. This is not just something that is said over a loudspeaker. This is something that has been worked on, that people have put a lot of effort into it. And I think that comes across. That always comes across as something that that provides a super positive, I guess, message, or reinforces the positivity of the message, reinforces the goodwill of the message, if you will.
If you were going to support the children that are in conflict and war and you have kind of a idea about what we're looking to achieve, how would you go about it? I need your guidance from, I don't think this is a unilateral corporate thing. I would like to see a number of corporations get involved and actually have it as a marketing campaign that they're all involved in. I think supporting children is something that we can get behind if we keep it under the elements that you're talking about. And I do think that the branding would be there for corporates that supported the effort. But what do you see from your side and with your expertise and your understanding, if this was coming to you as a project, how would you begin?
So I'd have one conversation very, very early on, and that goes back to the first thing I mentioned, which is there are no silver bullets. This is not going to be solved in 1 week. This is not going to be solved in a year. This is a progressive thing, a very progressive thing. Great. Uh, I say that big ideas are really small ideas that last for a long time.
Yes.
Um,
Mhm.
so you have to go at it. So, but
That's how
so
I
that's
see
a
it incidentally.
conversation.
I see it as a 10-year project.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say the first thing I need to understand is what is it that I want to change? What support children is a very broad message. What is it that I want to do? How do I narrow that down? What uh and to do the analogy with the work we did, we wanted to end the war, but that's a big project. So what we found that we could do was demobilize as many guerrillas as possible. That was the only thing. We didn't try to do anything else, and our campaign was not about doing anything else from that. So, what is it that we want to change? Is it I don't know what the answer is, because supporting children is a broad theme. The second thing I would look at is what angle has not been tried.
Mhm.
What angle feels different, but it also feels like it's always been there. That's where the magic will come. So um, again, using the example of our campaign, we had always had Christmas. We knew that the guerrillas wanted, and we had known that historically. We didn't discover this, that the guerrillas wanted to celebrate Christmas, and they did celebrate Christmas. and that the number of people that left the guerrilla, that escaped the guerrilla during the Christmas period, was higher than the rest of the year. That was a fact. It was there. Just nobody had seen it. Those facts, those little nuggets that are sitting there that you think about and you say, yeah, yeah, that was very obvious. Uh, you have to discover one of those. And that's where the real magic happens.
So
Um,
fascinating.
and I would say the third one is, do you have the right funding? Because there is no such thing as a cheap effort.
Yeah.
You may spend very little time very little money producing it and getting it ready, but you have to get it out in front of people. You have to make sure that people see it. So it is, I think, the majority of the good intentions of the world in terms of communication falter for lack of proper funding. I think even the UN does a lot of super campaigns, but they don't have money for the media. They don't, honestly.
Yeah.
So they get some free space, and it's not organized. And the reason we had a good measure of our success was because there was a real budget that there was a dedicated budget from the government to buy the media, to get this campaign in front of people. There was a real budget.
To sustain it over time. When you're talking about a real budget, what kind of numbers are you thinking about?
I don't remember what it was in terms of media, but it was pretty large. It was like we were one of the top 100 advertisers in the country.
Mhm.
Emergency relief is a very complicated thing because you have to have the funds at your disposal in order to be able to deploy to deploy them. And people tend, at least in my experience, people tend to focus on more tangible things than emergency funds for things that. So it always takes a while for the aid to come because people have to see in order for them to reach into their wallets and help you uh, put this whole together, or volunteer, or donate toys, or whatever it is that you're looking for. Um, so that is a difficulty in that sort of thing. So I, for advertising, at least my opinion is that in order to have a campaign that is effective and that you can measure its effectiveness, I would possibly focus on things that are permanent, uh, things that you can foresee, things like I don't know, I don't know what it is, but hunger in or food deserts, or bad nutrition. So it would need to be kind of like a permanent thing. Now, in order to do that, you have to understand whose mind you have to change. And it's very easy to talk to the converted, to preach to the converted.
Right.
Um, and those people will help you and will volunteer and will believe that what you're doing is important. But whose mind do you have to change? Who is posing the obstacles? And that, in our case, it was 30,000 people. In order to achieve peace, we needed to change the mind of 30,000 people. That was it. Um, we managed to change the mind of 24,000, and 6,000 we didn't. But that's fine, you know? Who do you need to change? Whose minds do you need to change, and what do you need to change them to? Uh, because one of the tragedies with one of the tragedies with advertising done in this field is that everybody who walks into my office with a thing, with a charity, has my full attention and takes a piece of my heart with them. And sorry, so what I'm saying is every single charity is indispensable. Every single charity has something that needs to be done, but there's only so much money out there and so much bandwidth that anybody can give, can devote to. So everybody has a different charity that they back, or that they feel is important to them, and that changes all the time. Therefore, no charity is well funded enough. And tragically, some charities depend on the problem to continue to exist in order for them to continue to exist, which is tragic. It's difficult to admit, but the ideal situation, and that's something that I believe is the ideal situation. It's something that I described as the objective of our agency with our government client is that one day we don't have to work for them anymore.
No.
Our objective was to end the need for our campaign.
No.
So you have to be that ambitious, really.
Yeah,
Not
that's
solve the problem.
that's a great goal.
Yeah. And that should be your vision. There should be no more children without a toy ever, or something, right? Whatever it is, but you have to have that big ambition, and you have to realize once you have that big ambition, you have to you then start to unpick it, and you start to understand what it's going to take, and who do you need to change, whose minds do you need to change, and why, and at what point, and then you have a program. So I think that's yeah, what do I need to change and what do I need to end? What angle is interesting and whose mind do I have to change? And
Those are
do I have
great
the right
questions.
amount of
What,
funding?
oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off. What were you saying?
No, and do I have the right amount of funding?
Oh, yeah, the funding. Oh, yeah. Right.
So that I could have kind of a picture of what it is that can be done realistically. But yeah, and I don't know, because I think the whole helping children is, as I said before, is very broad. I think you need to identify exactly what it is that you want to end, and end that before you move on to the next thing.
I love
And I
that.
think it is baby steps. As I said, there's no silver bullet. You have to go one little thing at a time, one little place at a time, and prove that that you managed to make that a thing in the past, even if it's in a 5 block radius, right? Even if it's there, say, look, this problem existed and now it doesn't.
That's a very
Now
good
let's
approach.
do it
That's a
in
very
numbers.
good next best step.
Yeah.
I so appreciate your time. You've been very, very generous with your time and your talent.
Take care.
We can do it.
Thank you very much.